Hi, I'm Kaytlyn,
And I'm Brianna.
and welcome to the Readers Clubhouse, where we revisit our childhood favorite content. Brianna, my question for you today is, what are your thoughts, some of your thoughts? Let's limit ourselves here, okay? What are some of your thoughts about the age of protagonists in stories? Ready, set, go.
I think for me, I as I've gotten older, I have found myself less interested in reading stories about like teenagers or kids because you can't really like connect with them as much. You still do, like I still like watching like animated shows or movies and stuff or things
Mhm.
about people in those age groups, but sometimes just the things they deal with at those in those age groups, it doesn't hit close as home as when you're reading things about a protagonist that's closer to your age or older
Yeah.
even and stuff. And so that's something that I found myself actually I think that's one of the factors behind me reading the genres that I do is I've found more stuff regarding people who are of an age to me,
Mhm.
usually, though that's not always the case. But yeah, I think that's a really big important thing is having older protagonists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree, especially because recently I've gotten a bit more into like murder mysteries and stuff like that.
Mm,
And even my historical enjoyment of books or stories, I guess in general, tends to be a lot of um young protagonists who get the call to adventure and the prophecy is about this character or
yeah.
whatever. And even, our season two main sort of author that we're going to be exploring is
Yeah.
all of her characters are young women who like 11, 12, even as young as 11 or 12 getting the call to
But
adventure.
but we also get to see them run the gambit of their life too, which is the
Yes.
thing.
We get to
Yeah.
see some of them. And
Some
and
of
like
them, yeah.
the first one does we get to see her in her mid 40s and things like that. But
Yeah.
she's not the main protagonist of
No.
the stories. And so I've in particular there's a couple of books I've read recently that have recently being the last few years, by the way, that
Yeah.
have older main characters. So the Thursday Murder Club by Richard
Mm,
Osman is a really good example where all the main characters are in their 80s, 70s,
yeah.
80s, or something like that. And it's fun, it's comedy, it's murder mystery, all that kind of stuff. And even there's another one that I read recently where the main character was in her mid 30s.
Mm.
And that's not usually the age range of the heroes. It tends to be sort of depending on the audience. So if you have a middle grade or lower grade, they tend to be, if you're reading a book meant for a 10-year-old, your main character is probably going to be somewhere in their age range of 10 to 14.
Yeah.
Young adult fantasy tends to be, 15 to 18, even a lot in the
Maybe pushing
romantasy.
20, 21, possibly.
Yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
romantasy main characters are like late teens, early 20s.
Which,
I know,
why? I'm
I
like, I don't
know.
want to watch some I just got out of my childhood girl get with a 300-year-old XYZ thing.
Yes, but a lot of people do want that, Brianna.
The thing that bothers me is it's women that write it all the time, and I feel like we should know better, but
But also you know, you know, it some stereotypes are there for reasons, and
there are, yeah.
you know, it's I have other problems with it, but we're not here to talk
I
about
know, yes.
our frustrations with the romantasy genre. If you love
Yeah.
romantasy novels, that's totally great. Good for you. I'm glad.
Yeah. I read
And you do
romantic
I
novels,
was
but I
gonna
still
say
have problems.
you love romantasy novels of certain
I
types.
like of certain types,
Yes.
and thankfully, a lot of those that I've read do tend to have the protagonist be at least almost 25,
Yeah, fair
usually. Of
enough.
the if it's younger, if they're like younger than the person or
The
whatever they're
non-human.
the non-human they're in love with and stuff. And so I'm
Mhm.
like, at least they're like an adult
Sure.
more or less.
Sure.
So
Anyway,
yeah,
the point is, I have been really enjoying reading books with older main characters,
yeah,
especially I love a grandma who becomes the
I
hero.
know you
And
do.
I read one, I think it's called Edna Fisher or something like that. The Remarkable Life of Edna Fisher. I might be confusing some things, but um, yeah, I find it really compelling
Did you know that there's an RPG, a tabletop RPG about you playing old women solving mysteries?
No, I did not
It's
know that.
called, I think it's called Brindlewood Cove. My boss is telling me about it.
That is so cool.
We will have to like do something with that at some
Yeah,
point. Yeah.
that's really fun.
I literally was like, Kaytlyn would like this.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
I think I just like it because it's a reminder that we're not done with our lives once we hit like 35. That
Yeah.
actually we have like 30 is about halfway, maybe a little more than halfway through a life. Like, obviously we live to about 80s, so, maybe a little less than halfway is what I meant to say. Not a little more than halfway, but like around halfway through our lives is our 30s. And that's usually sort of people, I don't know, we get this weird thing in our heads of the 20s are the time of your life and everything peaks in your 20s and everything's downhill from there and it's all blah, blah, blah. Your body's decaying, which I totally feel actually. So the decay of the human body past like hitting the growth point or whatever when it does start to decay, man, I've never felt it more than in my late 20s. So, oh dear. Anyway, but I also love seeing stories of people in their 40s or 50s or 70s or 90s or something like that doing fun things and doing activities. So that's important today because one of the main characters, we're reading a Brian Jacques novel. There's like 500 million. But sort of the one the book is titled after is an older gentleman. So why don't you give us some book stats?
All right. So our book stats for The Bellmaker, which is the book that we were talking about this time around, was released in 1994. As we all know, it was written by Brian Jacques, our old friend, and it is still a fantasy fiction type of book genre. And generally, it kind of like it can be some people consider it a middle grade, which it was interesting when I read that because I'm like, I feel like this is leaning a little bit more towards young adult.
Yeah.
But also it doesn't have certain other elements that a lot of young adult books are considered or that make people consider something being a young adult book. So there's that. But the big thing about this, and compared to some of the more recent stuff we read, is it is a direct sequel to our previous book that you will have heard on our last episode, Mariel of Redwall, except for this time it's about her father, Joseph the Bellmaker, that is the reason why it's titled The Bellmaker.
My hero.
And yes, honestly, Joseph is a really cool old dude, basically. That is like literally we saw that in Mariel. He literally created a rebellion group once he was free of the bad guy in that one and stuff, and helped the crew from that group fight back and everything. So like he's a really cool dude. He always is described as being strong, which is really cool and stuff, and just really overall great main protagonist in something. And I'm glad that we got to see that a lot more in this one, which was really a nice touch. Again, going back on what we were talking about with having older protagonist. Now I'm gonna do the overview. I'm just warning everybody, I didn't write out a script for this one. So we're going to do what I remember about the book and also me using a couple of notes that I wrote down about the book in general. So we're introduced to this new story with this look into who our antagonist is, which his name is kind of funky. It is Ergen Negru, and has also a wife, which is also the funny thing about the Redwall series is often the bad guys have spouses and children.
And they hate each other.
They always hate each other.
They always hate each other.
Okay, I was like, that's definitely going to continue the family line down the interesting choices. So Ergen Negru and his wife travel from the upper north area to the more southern area, which is warmer, and they end up conquering this place called Southsword, which is ruled by the Squirrel King and Queen. And then there's a lot of unrest and all of that. They take the throne and keep the king and queen and their young son captive and all that kind of thing. So that's going on. We also have some other things that are going on at the same time. We pan back to the Abbey where we see Joseph and some of the characters from the previous book. Some of them have passed on, like the previous abbot, and now Saxtus, who was who was Muriel and Dandon's really good friend, is now the abbot, and we still have some other characters who are still older who are part of it, like Badger Mother Melis, and a couple of other characters. Like we have, what was the recorder's name again? I keep forgetting.
Well, it's Saxtus. Saxtus is the one doing the writing.
Yes, but who was he wasn't the recorder. It was old blind man.
Oh, Simeon.
Simeon. That's what it was. He's the herbalist, I think is what it is, or something like that. So we're back at the Abbey. They're having normal Abbey stuff. Joseph is like, I haven't seen my daughter in 4 seasons. I hope she's doing okay. Some stuff happens, and you get kind of like a spiritual message. They make a spiritual message from Martin the Warrior, and Joseph is given like this task of, you need to go south because your daughter needs your help, and these other people need your help, and I need you to go take care of this, and you're going to bring a group of friends with you. We have a returning friend from the previous one in the group, Han Rosie. We have, what was the hedgehog's name? The really friendly hedgehog that talked about his uncle all the time.
Dury.
We have Dury. We have another squirrel from the last book. And we have Formal. Poor Formal goes with them, and he's just like, Brian loves to put his moles through the ringer. Like, they always have to go off an adventure, and they're just like, oh no. It's great. Like, we love them taking and like figuring this stuff out. So they're set off. And then we also pan over to Muriel and Dandon, who are on the last, they don't have any supplies. They're kind of like on the last legs of, we should have head back to Redwall probably at this point, maybe, but they're really far south and they can't get back. They run into this young hedgehog who was being enslaved by these weasels or something, and they save him. And they start running into stuff that indicates that the area that they're in, Southsward, is under an evil tyrant, essentially. And they kind of start to become a part of this like rebellion group and trying to save the king and queen, and all this like kind of like a lot of chaotic things happen there. And there's like a break into the castle that they're not a part of, but other side characters that we're introduced to break in, and they save the queen and the prince. And this mute badger, whose name I can't remember her name. Muta. There we go. Jeez Louise.
Or Muta.
Muta. I think it was Muta.
Yeah.
And the captain of the guard,
Rab.
They both like disappear, and nobody knows what happened, and they thought they were sacrificed themselves and everything. So there's that. Now, one of the other things that's going on with the Redwall group, they meet my favorite side character, who's not really a side character, but is another great example of a like older protagonist, sort of, is Gale. Nope. I had his name in my head there for a second, and I cannot remember now.
It was close. It's Finbar.
It's Finbar Galedeep. I got it backwards. Finbar Galedeep is essentially a otter pirate, and he lost his ship. He's like, let's get my ship back, and then I can take you there. They get the ship back from these rat pirates. Stuff happens. 2 of the rat pirates from the ship that they took actually make their way back to Redwall, cause chaos at Redwall. One of them kills Melis. Super sad, very depressing. But the other one, who's kind of, let's be honest, he's not the sharpest tool in the toolbox, kind of a thing.
He's not.
He's a little dumb but kind and stuff, and he regrets it and kills his captain, who was the other rat that was with him, because he's like, you killed this person. And the Redwallers end up like forgiving him, and he doesn't stay there, but he is like considered still a part of the community, and they take care of him when he comes to visit and everything. So that kind of like thing happens at Redwall. Then we move back to the chaos that happens with when they're trying to sail down to Southsward. Lots of stuff happens. They think they lose people, they get the people back. They get stuck at one point where they can't sail, and they have to wait for like wind to pick up. They pick up these shipwrecked children who are from Southsward, by the way, and they're like, oh, you'll be able to help us find our way in the country, because one of them was an older kid. And they make their way down to Southward. And eventually we see Meryl and Dandon meet up with a larger group who breaks into the castle and start trying to like make their way, break in there, try to I feel like they were trying to save somebody or something, but they were just trying to like cause chaos. Mariel gets stuck in there. She finds Muta and Rab, who both have gone a little crazy and don't remember what happened to them because they were hurt so badly. And this really sophisticated mole called, I think his name was Egbert or something like that. And Egbert is like very much like well spoken. I just want to read. I don't want to fight, but I will help you sneak it in and out of the castle because I know how to do that. So he helps them. He was the one that saved Muta and Rab when they were like dying. And so now Mariel, Muta, and Rab have like taken up like they've basically barricaded themselves into the gatehouse. We have Joseph's crew coming up. They come up into the battle and everybody meets up. All the chaos as a normal Redwall battle happens when literally all the different teams finally come together essentially, which is again very on par with Brian Jacques writing these stories. They all fight. Stuff happens. Rab and Muta remember who they are. Mariel sees her dad. Her dad is like, yay, you're alive. Let's get this guy. Then we get a final conflict between Ergen Nagaru and Finbar Galedeep, who have not met each other up to this point, but they do the final conflict. And oh my gosh, Finbar gets him, and then Finbar dies, and it's so sad. I literally have told this is one of my key memories of my younger me, and why this book was my favorite, was just the tragedy of his story, because you find out earlier in the story, his family was killed by the rats that took his ship. And so he essentially was sort of on a suicide mission in a way that he never fully was like, he's like, if I die, I die. Like, he's never fully trying to live. He's just there in the moment and not like, yeah. So that was always like kind of the sad part about it. In the end, Joseph decides to stay in Southward, takes care of some of the orphans, builds them a bell because that's his job. And everybody else makes it back down to Redwall and happily ever after, essentially, as it usually does. Yeah. So that's my unscripted overview.
Well done, Brianna.
Thank you. I don't feel like I went on for too long, did I?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Woo!
Woo!
Good job, Brianna.
There you go. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I mean, classic songs and poetry. I don't have anything particularly noteworthy about the songs and poetry. It's a pretty standard Brian Jacques novel in that there's a poem sort of riddle thing that gets them on
every
journey.
time. Yeah.
It's classic. I don't remember any particular songs that stood out to me or like really made me feel super emotional. So they're really great. Listen to the audiobook.
Yeah.
Is what I have to say. Although
always
my only like hesitation with listening to the audiobook sometimes is that I have to listen. I don't have to, okay? Hold on. Let's remember you don't have to do anything. But I like to listen to it at like 1.5 speed. And listening to the songs at 1.5 speed is very funny because it's very fast fiddle. But you can tell that it's not meant to be fast, that it's meant to be slightly slower, and then it just gets a little bit funny. So I guess I have all that to say. Any thoughts on the songs and poetry?
No, none of them really stuck out to me that like in previous ones. So it's very standard Redwall, normal songs and poetry in this. Yeah.
Okay, so world building. I have finally, for the first time since we started this podcast, have included. Well, no, I have so many thoughts, Brianna.
You concluded the map, is what you did.
I included the map. Yes, I included the Wikipedia map because thank you, Redwall fans from all over for contributing. Decades past. Also, there's a book I want to buy. It's on Amazon. You can buy it on Amazon, but it does have the actual map in it, and it's a bit more of like history of Redwall stuff. So I want to buy that. It's like $35 though, so I don't really want to spend $30 on it right now. So maybe a birthday present this year.
Maybe, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so it's just helpful if people care, if you want to know, there is a map and it
Hmm.
has all of the locations in the books labeled on the map, so you get this sort of greater what they call Redwall country and beyond. And
Yeah.
so it's worth it to look, especially if you are actually reading along with us and you're wondering, as I often have, how do the Redwall people not know about all of these other lands already?
Yeah.
Like, especially because of all their historical records, because they're really keen on taking notes and having recorders record the history of everything that's happening. How do they not just know, oh, well, the caves where Martin lived are only a few days north and slightly west of us? These are questions that I have that we'll never have
Well,
answers.
that's what one of my things about this whole book, while I like it, it's especially in like reference to Mariel or even any of the other books. I feel
Yeah.
like Martin is in the same boat a little bit
Mhm.
because literally, I guess it's weird because even Mossflower felt more like Redwall than like Martin or
Mhm.
this one did. And it's not because Redwall wasn't a thing. It's just it like we did have a little bit of story centered around Redwall,
Mhm.
but the conflict,
Mhm.
90% of the conflict was somewhere else. And
Mhm.
yes, that is technically what's up with Mariel, but like the conflict from the thing they were dealing with in that one came to Redwall. And it did to a smaller degree in this, but it was literally just two rats
Mhm.
and stuff. And I don't know, it's just like it's very interesting that we have a place like Southsward, which is like a traditional medieval kingdom feel to it.
Yeah.
And we don't see that as often in other things.
We also
Like
never see Southward again.
never again, which is wild to me. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you introduce this literally this whole country that has a king and a queen. One of the people who's very important to Redwall stays there, and we never make reference to it again
Mhm.
and stuff. And that is, while I love Redwall, that is one of my biggest critiques, I guess, of it
Yeah.
and stuff, is how much lore is dumped into this and left behind,
Mhm.
essentially, and not really used again.
Mhm.
And I feel like that one, this one is one of the ones that like really showcases that if you've read the whole
Yeah.
series. Yeah.
And there's some other times where we run into that as well because I can't I want to say that in the book Solomon Dastron,
Mm.
which I believe is the one with the I mean spoiler alert for that book, twin badgers. I believe it's that one. One of the badgers is found on this island in a lake,
Mm.
and you're like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. And then several books later, in the Krega era,
Saga.
um, with Krega Saga, we've got Marl Fox, the book, and Marl Fox Island, and it is
Yeah.
actually the same island that the badger was found on, but just sometime after that particular badger left, for some reason, he was the like protector, and this Marl Fox clan came and took over the island. So there's
Yeah.
some moments in the series of Brian reusing
Yeah.
locations, but just having them be very, very different from when they were before. But
Yeah.
this is something I really wondered. And for a long time I got confused because I thought potentially of Marielle of Redwall or
Mm.
Marielle, when we were reading Marielle, they went to Terra Mort, they went to Fort Bladeger. There was a whole
Yeah.
thing on that island. And later in the series, we'll get to a place called San Petra, which is, I believe, in Pearls of Lutra, the
Mm.
Otter Island, basically.
Yeah.
That's overtaken by a bunch of bad guys. And I I thought that no, hold on. This map is telling me that I'm wrong. Anyway, thing is, I thought all the islands were the same.
Mm.
It turns out they're not. They're actually
Yeah.
different islands. So it is just an interesting world building thing.
Yeah. Well, it's
So
like the thing you were talking about, how it's like, why does Redwall doesn't know about these places? The only place consistently that Redwall has a relationship with is Salamandastron.
yeah.
And the funny thing is he kind of Redwall's our first one, but then we
Hmm.
spend a good chunk of time the books that he wrote after that going back and forth between before and
Yeah.
after that book. And it was very evident in a lot of the prequel stuff
Hmm.
to the book Redwall. that they've had a lot of interactions with
Yeah.
Salmandastron. This one being the like Mariel being the case, because we
Yeah.
don't go to Salmandastron on this one, that there has been a relationship there before,
Hmm.
but Salmandastron is never approached in Redwall for
No.
like aid or anything. It's stuff of like, hey, we're under attack. Let's send somebody
Yeah.
there because they have XYZ. We don't
Yeah.
even see it in Madame Mayo, which is wild to
Yeah.
me and
Because
stuff.
and this is the thing that astounded not astounded me, like confused me was and I guess I wish Brian Jacques were still alive so that we could ask questions. Oh,
He would not
um,
probably be, he was pretty old when he
I
passed and
know. I
everything.
just
So,
I'm sure, but you know what I mean. I wish. If wishes were fishes, I would still be hating on fish. But I think that my question, especially with Basil, right? Because
mm,
Basil is a hair from the military, and
yeah,
you have to ask yourself what military. I did ask that question in our
yeah,
episode. What military?
yeah,
Question is answered later. The
yeah.
no, I'm sorry. Well, later, but before, because in Mossflower, the question is answered by Boar the Fighter. Like, what military could Basil have possibly been a part of? Oh, well, it was the military at Salamandastron. And I'm sure that is probably where he's like, oh, badger or a hare that was in the military. Ooh, okay, this mountain full of hares that, oh my gosh, they're military. So, and but that also brings up other questions of like, well, what about Captain Snow? Because he was supposed to have served in the military with Basil. So was Snow
That's a
at one
little
point?
bit. I
I
always kind of more interpret it as like he acts like a military man and had
but
some
he's actually
respect for
not.
Basil. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
something like that.
I
That
always
was
took
my
it
interpretation.
as they served in the military together and
Mm.
he saved his life in a battle once. Anyway, the thing is, there's lots of questions about this
Yeah.
world building. Um, it is something I guess we've already mentioned this a little bit about how randomly we will have villains that are couples, but for some reason they just hate each other.
Almost every
And
time. I can't think of a
even
time it doesn't happen.
I can't either. And particularly when we get to Marl Fox, we'll talk about it a bit more, but they
Yeah.
also tend to hate their children.
Yeah.
And a good example of this is Sela and Chicken Hound in Redwall. Sela did not love her son. Chicken
No.
Hound did not love his mother. There was a lot of animosity between
Yeah.
them, despite the fact that they traveled together and were. And so it's just really interesting how Brian. He's very much we've talked about this. There's not a lot of
Yeah.
nuance in characters, and if you're
No.
on the good side, you're on the good side. If you're on the bad side, you're on the bad side. However, let's get into some characters
Yeah.
because we'll talk about our favorites. I don't really have a least favorite. Like we've not really done least favorites often. It's just been kind of thoughts on characters.
Yeah. It's kind of like there's some like what was his bucket? The vole from
Oh, Colin. Yeah, no, he was the
Colin.
worst. Yeah.
Colin's the worst. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we'll sometimes get characters like that.
Yeah.
But generally it's usually like everybody served their purpose in the
Yeah.
story, and we can't really hate them for that
No,
for the most
absolutely not.
part.
So just a few characters that I want to bring up. They're not my favorite characters. I just
Mm.
because my thing about favorite characters is we all know who our favorite character is in this book. Like I'm sure we have the same one. Finbar Gildeep.
Yeah, okay. I was
Yeah.
like, are we going
The
'cause
tatted otter pirate. I'm just
the
saying.
tatted otter pirate? I was like, wait, are we going the badger is always our favorite vibe with
Okay.
this? And I'm like, that wasn't like Muta was cool and Melis was great, but they weren't quite like
Rest in peace.
yeah, like they weren't my favorite and everything.
I do think Rab and Muta's
Yeah.
story through
Yeah.
that of them, the pain that they experienced driving them so far into insanity that
Yeah.
they're mute and they don't speak. And Rab was a speaking otter.
Yeah.
Muta was not. But just I think that was really beautiful. And then at the end, Muta's whole thing was I protect the baby squirrel. That is
Yeah.
that was her role. She was the nursemaid of
The prince.
the prince. And Rab, he had a wife and children, but they both were like, we will stand our ground and protect the escape of our people. And not only did then their families, because Muta may not have been a squirrel, but she was still family to the Squirrel King. The squirrel royalty. I don't know how you would, because he's called Gale Squirrel King, but does that mean his wife's name is Squirrel Queen and the son is Squirrel Prince? Is that their last name?
Good question.
I
We
know.
do not know.
Yeah. But then Rab's stream battle, right? He had a wife
Mhm.
and children, and the grief that they had to experience knowing, oh, our friends and family have given their lives to save us. But
Yeah.
then I just thought it was really beautiful at the end when they're in this big whole battle and the crew coming from the Abbey have collected the clans that are on South
Yeah.
Sword or around South Sword and all sort of come together. It's very Brian Jacques to do rather than sort of fixing the problem with just the characters we have right now. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna go, why didn't we do this in the first place is a question I have.
Yeah.
We're gonna go into all the other places around us and we're gonna say, hey, you random hedgehogs, hey, you random squirrels, hey, you random otters, you all hate the same people, let's go fight them. And then
Yeah.
everybody's like, and I'm sitting here questioning, so when Gale's castle was taken over, like a few days ago, months ago, however you
It was
factor in
months
time,
ago.
y'all just didn't, you're just now hearing about it? Or like y'all knew about it? You know what I'm saying?
I remember it was, I forget, but it was like I remember the hedgehogs that the Abbey team met and everything. It was
Yeah.
like they are oppressing us. It's like it's honestly very reminiscent of normal life of like
Yeah.
we're not gonna be too upset if there's a change in authority, but if they start making some choices, we're going to go to XYZ kind of
Rebellion.
a thing and stuff. Yeah.
I
And obviously like
also
a lot of people liked, I think, the king, but like especially like the hedgehogs were like, we're our own thing, but like
yeah.
this guy is being a jerk
Yeah.
for
And
everybody. So
I also think sometimes you need a catalyst. I'm
yes, yeah.
answering my own question. Sometimes you need a catalyst, and the catalyst was the Redwall crew coming in and saying,
Yeah.
we're gonna
Or
take Ergen
also
Nygrim.
Mariel and Dandon.
Yes, but the people that were collected, the clans and all that,
yeah.
they
Yeah.
didn't know about Mariel and Dandon. Like
Yeah.
the catalyst was Joseph's crew coming
Yeah.
through. Yeah, so that was just really interesting. Anyway, just do you have any other thoughts on characters? I've got a few thoughts that I
Do you know
wrote
what's
down.
funny? A character we didn't mention really at all was the Colonel.
Oh, Meldrum.
Meldrum.
I know.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
Meldrum.
Meldrum, I just kind of, you know, he was okay.
He was all right.
kind of interesting. Meldrum with his many nieces and nephews who called him uncle. And
Yeah, he's like,
"Don't
don't
call me
call me
uncle.
Yeah.
I'm Colonel." And it's like, no, you're not, dude. You're our uncle. Okay.
You can barely fit in that uniform you wear.
Yep. It's very classic, like old person who's stuck in their ways and like really, really thinks of the good old days and sort of lives in their glory good old days. And it's like, okay, sir.
It made me laugh so hard when Brian dropped in the fact that Rosie's what's his name from the previous book?
Tarquin.
Tarquin is related distantly to him. And she called out, like, he's like, yes, my XYZ, and he was
my
like,
ancestor was this noble man, or noble man.
And she's just like, that's not what Tarquin told me. Like,
that's not what the rest of the family says.
No, yeah. And so Han Rosie was just like, that's the other thing. I like Han Rosie because she says it straight and everything.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of Han Rosie, it's a good segue, Brandon. Well done. We said in the last episode about how she was more prevalent in this one, and it's true. She's actually the one that gets to go on the journey. And I really liked that because Han Rosie was obviously a important side character last time in Mariel, but Tarquin was the one on mission with
adventure.
Mariel. Yeah. And so I really enjoy the idea that, like, as a couple, Tarquin's just like, oh yes, hun, you can go off on this adventure. I mean, he was sad about it and he wanted to go.
No.
What?
Remember, they're like, wait, you can't leave me with the kids. And then they're like, but you can be our taster because so-and-so's gone. And he's like, oh, honey, go have a good time.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
I mean,
it was just funny. He's not like a bad husband. I'm not saying that. It's just, it was really funny to me that they did that. Yeah.
It's still like, it is a classic. It's something I've noticed so many times is that like when men get together to go do things, it's like, yeah, we can go do it. But then when the women are like, oh, we're gonna go do a thing, it's just like, well, who's gonna watch the kids? And
Yeah.
I'm like, you,
Yeah.
husband of the wives and fathers of the children, you're going to watch the
They're
children.
also your DNA. And you
They're
should be able to
your
take care of.
responsibility.
Yeah.
That is, it is. Why do you get to go off and be like, well, of course the kids are gonna be taken care of by mom, and then the moms go off, and it's just like, well, who's gonna watch the kids? Grandma? Like, no, no. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Calm down, Kaytlyn. Neither of us have children, so maybe I shouldn't be as angry about this, but I am.
I mean, you live with children, so.
I live with a family. Yes.
Yes.
That is true. That is a better way to phrase that than I live with children. Just sounds like I'm in an orphanage, Brianna.
I mean, they were calling you their, what was it, their live-in
They're
hobo or
homeless.
something?
They're homeless woman. Yeah,
They're homeless women.
it's true. Also, the garage gremlin is
The
another
garage
nickname
gremlin's
for
a good
me.
one. Yeah.
The woman who lives in our house is another
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had asked my friend who I'm living with, whose name I almost dropped on this.
Oh no.
This is the problem with talking to someone I talk to too often, is that I'm like, Brianna knows who I'm talking about. Wait a minute. Like, the rest of the world can't. I mean, they can, but I don't really. Anyway, the rest of the world being the 3 people that listen to this podcast. But I asked her, I was like, oh, what does your son say about his living situation, like when he goes to school? And she was like, I don't know. I haven't thought about that before. And I'm like, yeah, I just wonder sometimes of like, what does he say? Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, we're talking about Redwall.
Yep.
Con Rosie, fantastic. She almost dies / is assumed dead at some point.
Yeah.
And then I love that she and Dury are just like suddenly the toad gods because
the
toad whisperers because of their silliness.
Yep.
So that was cool. So I want to talk about Roof Brush because he's back again.
Yeah.
And I felt so bad for him in this book because he's really anxious.
The thing, I don't remember him being that anxious in the last book. It just felt really weirdly like
he was quiet, but he also stayed at home. He didn't go.
That's true. Yeah.
And I believe at the beginning of the book, there's even the sense of Roof is just like, oh God, now I have to be the one that goes.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to. He was like, no, I don't want to be the one that goes on adventure. I want to stay home. I want to stay in my abbey. I just want to be here. But then he gets the call. It says, well, actually, you're going to go.
Yeah.
And he's like, but why? Or as I like to say, teardrops on my guitar.
Yeah.
That's not quote from Kaytlyn.
The Kaytlyn idiom.
Someone else. Yeah. An idiom that Kaytlyn made out of someone else's song quote.
Well, it's a thing you say a lot. I've said it a lot for years. So
I have indeed. But yeah, so he's just very weepy and cries a lot. So when Dury and Han Rosie get washed overboard during the storm, right? Roof is grieving because it's his best friend and he's really sad. And it makes sense that he's grieving and is actually genuinely really sad. And then, because Brian Jacques is kind, I don't even know if this is kindness, he makes a new friend, a shrew named Fatch, who they become really tight because Fatch is like, I understand you're sad and it is really sad, but like, I'll be your friend now. And then in the battle at the very end, so they recover Dury, and then there's Dury's back, and Roof's like, okay, yay, I've got my best friend back, and I have a new best friend, everything's happy. And then in the battle at the end, Fatch dies. His new best friend dies. And I'm like, man, Roof is going to have so much to talk about with his therapist. It is so sad. Okay. I felt so bad for him. And I was just like, oh, buddy, okay.
Yeah.
My heart goes out to you. So then I also want to talk about Blaggett because he is the anomaly in the Brian Jacques formula.
Yeah.
And we've said Brian Jacques is very rigorous in his good is good, evil is evil. There is very little nuance. There's some gray area. Some shrews can be a bit evil. But we don't have very many vermin that can be good.
No.
And this Blaggett actually is the first, and at the moment is the only one I can think of in the entire series that is actually a vermin that is actually like sees the good and wants to be good and ends the story alive and good.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the alive part.
Yes, the alive part is the important part because sometimes there can be
unless we count that one rat from Martin the Warrior that
on the beach
Rose's brother let leave. because he let him survive, I think, or something like that.
But we don't know if he was good at the end.
We really don't know. That's a really good point.
No.
He
They
just chose to walk away. So that may have just
yes,
been he was being smart and not that he was
because
like, I
all
choose
of
good.
his comrades were dying.
Yeah.
And then this random mouse that he made friends with when the mouse was pretending to be a rat was like, "Oh, I won't kill you." And the rat was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, thank goodness," and then ran away because
Yeah.
smart, my dude.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, he finds life at the Abbey to be really peaceful, and
Mhm.
he is enamored by it. He wants to live there. He doesn't really care about finding the treasure or whatever. He
Nope.
wants to build boats, and he wants to hang out with his little Dibbins who are his
Yep.
friends. He is simple, and he's
Yeah.
made fun of for being simple by his captain. But I think for me, it was a really good reminder that sometimes the simple things are really beautiful and really good because
Yeah.
again, he wanted to enjoy the good food. He didn't mind washing the dishes, mucking in
Nope.
when he needed to muck in. He liked to build boats. He liked to hang out with the kids and see them smile and enjoying his creations.
Yeah.
I think it's also really interesting seeing a character like that is then being enticed to do evil by his comrade. And at the end,
Who's
when
quote unquote smarter than him.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And when Slip ends up killing Melis,
Which it was Slip had moments where he realized certain things if I remember correctly and stuff. He didn't become good, and I don't think that ever would have been on his like sheet basically of
no.
like yeah. But I do think he realized certain things sometimes and he let his upbringing basically override those moments of, oh wait, this is actually kind of nice and everything.
But also like the reason Melis dies and the reason that like there's conflict right there is that something was stolen. They
Yeah.
accused the rats because they're like, of course it's the rats. And then as far as they could see, the rats didn't have what was stolen. And then there was a tussle and Melis ends up dying because of something that Slip did. They flee into the woods because that's the right thing for them to do is flee. Because the Abbey dwellers are like, wait, are we supposed to kill? Like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
And then Blaggett finds out that Slip did actually steal, and he was the culprit. He was guilty, and the fact that Melis died because of that just Blaggett ends up and it is gruesome. This is a thing of like young
Yeah.
adult. Like it kind of leans a little more towards the older age range, I think, of
Yeah.
a kid's book. Is Blaggett just goes and like straight up murders him.
Yeah, he does.
And it it is a little bit gruesome, but also I appreciate that Blaggett has this idea of I love the Abbey and I want it to be safe, but it's not a safe place for me here because the trauma of what I've witnessed and like
Yeah.
even that my own actions, I have to remove myself from this. But that he's not completely cast out and actually he's very welcomed. And anytime he visits, they're like, come eat with us. We'll pack you a lunch. We'll, come see your friends, the Dibbins, and build them a boat.
I think at one point, towards the end, Saxus makes a comment about like he's really filling out because he's eating so well and everything.
Yeah. He's not on a sea rat diet. He's on that Redwall diet, which will make you very fat.
Yeah.
Very, very fat. Yeah. I mean, I think Finbar is our favorite character. I don't know how much we need to say. Like we've already talked about him a bit.
He's a tragic character from literally the get-go and stuff. And he's a pirate and he has no holdups. It's kind of interesting because you could put him on the same plane as like rat pirates, but like he sailed the seas with his family. And that's actually one of the things I've thought about because again, I'm a writer and I like thinking about these kinds of things of like rats themselves, the fact that rats are made to be the bad guys in this, it's so interesting because rats themselves are not actual like animal rats are not like vicious or anything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that we put them on like this they're evil and I know that like I could go down the list of the reasons why people do, but it's just interesting.
They did bring the plague, you know what I'm saying?
But actually technically it was them, but it was also the fleas they were carrying and it's like they were also victims in this, etc.
Putting fleas in as main villains in a
No,
story
yeah,
is
it
not
doesn't work.
as
No.
satisfying. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just interesting to me that like we get these good creatures, Finbar, who's also a
Yeah.
pirate, but he has standards.
Yeah.
And we
It
don't have that ever for the rats and everything. But he also doesn't
I
like
also don't think they classify him as a pirate.
I'm
He's
pretty sure they called him an
he's
otter pirate.
I don't I don't remember them doing that. I know that he's
I
like
could
a
have
bit of a
sworn.
swashbuckler, like he's a
Which is a term for a pirate.
I but but it's different. You know what I
And
mean?
I
He's
that's
not
the thing. Like what you're saying, my point essentially though is
Yeah,
like
okay, fair enough.
it's like very similar but different. And he put like when Brian wrote him,
Yeah.
he has a lot of the things that the rats have, but he has standards
Yeah.
and
He's
stuff. And
got a
he
moral compass.
got a moral
Yeah.
compass for the most part. Except for when the thing I do as I've gotten older, and this
Hmm.
is not very as I've gotten older, there's times when I've read and watched certain things, and I completely understand when you want characters to be like, I'm not going to kill this person,
Hmm.
XYZ and stuff. But there's moments where like things are happening and they draw that line in the
Hmm.
weirdest moments
Hmm.
and stuff, and where I'm like, that person killed every single person that you knew. And
Yeah.
you're like, I'm not going to kill him or her, XYZ or whatever. And I'm like, you spent the whole book or story or whatever. Like, it's not even always a revenge thing. It's just what's going on. And like, I can't kill you now. And then you almost get killed because you've decided to let this person go. And I don't need it explained to me of why, like, that might be like the struggle with the blah, blah, blah of like the main characters and everything like that. Sometimes it is nice just to see somebody, you're evil. You've killed the people that I loved. We're gonna end this.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things I think I appreciate about Gale,
Hmm.
or not Gale, about Finbar was he did have a moral compass, but he also was a man on a mission
Hmm.
of I need my shit back
Hmm.
and I'm going to take care of my friends
Yeah.
and nothing's going to get in the way of that.
Yeah.
And so that was something I think I appreciate it. And this is a weird direction to go with this, but it is slightly personal on that. A lot of the time growing up, there was certain moments where people didn't go to bat
Hmm.
for in scenarios that I was in, all those kinds
Hmm.
of things. And seeing somebody take a stand and not just be a middleman or try to be like I think a middleman honestly is the best part between me and the
Yeah.
other party.
Hmm.
It's nice to see those characters sometimes. And I think it's my own internal thing of I don't get angry very easily, but
Yeah.
I do think it's still in there.
Yeah.
And seeing a character be able to express their anger, whether that's physically or like vocally,
Hmm.
is always hit me a certain way and
Hmm.
stuff. And
Yeah.
just because they do, it doesn't mean that they're any less of a character than the good guy that chose not to kill the bad guy, kind of a thing and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
think
think
it's
that's one of the reasons why Gale, or not, I keep calling him Gale, is because
uh,
his last name. That's why Finbar really, I think, hit home with me is his tragedy, but also he's like, I'm gonna get stuff done.
yeah. I think
Yeah.
it is a really interesting thing of like morality and like what's good and right, what's wrong,
Yeah.
what's and also our definition of justice and who gets to mete out justice on
Yeah.
the wicked or the evil or the
Yeah.
villain kind of a thing. And I mean that's the question of all, and not to get super philosophical, but like that's the question of society when you're making
Yeah.
laws. What is good and right? What do we praise? What do we punish? What do we who gets to determine what is just or unjust, and who gets to punish the unjust and who gets to reward the just?
Yeah.
So it's just questions I think that are obviously sort of difficult to answer in a lot of ways.
They
And
are. And I think certain stories, I'm not in any way saying poo-poo to stories where the
can
character
I
makes that. Yeah.
a good example, and I think a better example, not a better example. So the thing about Finbar, he's true to his character, right?
Yeah.
So he does have a morality, he does have lines that he won't cross, but
Yeah.
killing the villains, killing the bad guys is not a
Yeah.
line that he's not going to cross.
Yeah.
Like that's there's no line for him there, I guess.
No.
So he will kill Ergen Nagru because he knows Ergen Nagru is evil and
Yeah.
is oppressing a whole region essentially. And so he's going
Yeah.
to kill him because that's his thing. So that totally makes sense. There's another good example of, because I think what it is when you have characters that don't draw the line, or they do draw the line and they cross that line. So it's somebody who says, I'm not going to kill this thing, and then I actually do it anyway.
Hmm.
Or it's people who are like, oh, I'm just gonna kill. Okay, well, I'll let you go free because
That's
you
a
know what I
thing
mean?
that has gotten me before of like, okay, you've not drawn this line the again, like
Mhm.
I can think of a video game this happening, but yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah, there's that like the line is drawn in a weird place
Yeah.
sometimes, and I'm like, I just want them to live their true self up until the end even.
It's not even living their true self. It's being honest, like where is
Yes,
your
yeah.
actual line?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
not and I think it's poor writing if you have a character who in this the killing part, I guess, if we're talking about
Yeah.
just like killing, will kill whomever they need to for whatever reasons, like
Yeah.
justice reasons or whatever, and then just decides to have mercy because of because it makes a better story that they let the villain go free because they're the bigger person or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think a story I really, really liked, because I mean, I also have deep anger in me somewhere,
Yeah.
of a similar kind.
Yeah.
And but something I really appreciate is Avatar: The Last Airbender, right?
Mhm.
Aang, his whole culture and people are pacifists.
Yeah.
And so they're not trying to kill people, they're not trying to fight. That's not his vibe.
Yeah.
And through most of the series, a lot of his fighting isn't even aggressive fighting. It's deflection, and it's sort of dancing around the people that he's
Yeah.
fighting. And in the end, he's wrestling with this, like, do I kill the Fire Lord? We should do something on Avatar: Last Airbender one day because I have so many
On the
thoughts about that.
list.
One day. Maybe that could be season 3. We do
Right.
rewatch of Avatar: Last
Oh
Airbender.
wow. Okay.
Um, but in the end, he's sitting there with that question of, do I kill the Fire Lord? Like,
Mhm.
do I have to go against the lines that I have drawn? Do I actually have to break my own moral compass because that's what everybody else is telling me is justice?
Yeah.
Is that something I have to do? And what ends up happening, right, is he finds there's a way to be just and right because the Fire Lord needed to be stopped. He needed to
Yeah.
be taken down. He needed to be the people needed to be freed, essentially. And so Aang found a way to stick to his moral compass and not like destroy his own morality
Yeah.
just for the sake of what other people say. And so I think Finbar is again a good example of a character who's keeping to his compass, right?
Yeah.
He's being true to his own character. And I think that's really important because obviously people make bad choices, and
Yeah.
in moments of heightened emotion you can make bad choices and mistakes, and sometimes you do have a moral compass and you're trying to operate under this, but you fail. You're going to
Yeah.
fail, you're going to make mistakes. And I think it is encouraging to see that you can have a moral compass
Mhm.
and you can stick to it. And
Yeah.
justice, I mean, not to get off theological, justice will come
Yeah.
to the unjust at some point.
Yep.
Ergen Nagru was all confident about being the king of South Sword, essentially. And what ends up happening, right? He's like, I killed a wolf. And everybody's like, you didn't kill the wolf. You found its corpse. And then you cut
Yeah.
it open and then you're wearing it now.
Yep.
And then what happens is the wolf's teeth are what kill him because
Yep.
Finbar's not even like Finbar's the one that smashed club or whatever onto his
Yeah.
head and smashed teeth into his brain. Again, this is for children? Question mark?
Yeah. Question mark.
I don't know. All right, Bruno, let's do it. Nostalgia rating.
This one's a 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah.
It was my favorite growing
Yeah.
up. I think it held up really well as a story. I do say overall, though, some of my holdups about the fact how it connects with the rest of the series,
Yeah.
it does detract from it if I look at it as a part of the series as a whole, but it just as itself, as
Yeah.
a sequel to Mariel, I love it.
Yeah.
And I love Joseph. He is a great, like, father figure, not just to
Yeah.
his own kid, but to the other kids. He takes care of
Yeah.
everybody. Gale is a really cool character. He is roguish.
Yeah.
He is caring, and he's really cool and stuff. And a lot of the others like side characters, like Mariel and Dandon are great, but they're like that was my I would say that would be my one complaint is how little Mariel and Dandon really like do in the story
Yeah.
because they spend like I feel like chapters on that roof
Yeah,
at
they
one
do.
point because they're stuck in there and everything. So, that but they had their story in the last book, which I think
Yeah.
was what this was, is there are
Mhm.
more support characters in this,
Yeah.
and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's a 5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah. I think mine's 4 out of 5.
Mm.
This I have strong memories of this book because I read it
Yeah.
often as a kid. Um, and we've talked about how we're both pretty sure we read Bellmaker before we read Mariel
Yeah,
of Redwall.
absolutely.
And so I really appreciate I think you and I have talked about this a bit recently, maybe even yesterday actually, when we were talking about friendship. And I think in our current society and cultural climate, it's actually really hard to have a friend of any kind and for it to be like, oh, you're just friends. Like it's just
Yeah.
friendship there. There is this assumption that anybody you meet now is a potential romantic partner. And that's just bottom line, like, oh, they must be in love with each other because you can't have friends because you also can't have close friendships, you can't have intimate friendships, and it can't just be platonic. And okay, I'm getting on a soapbox here. Anyway, but one thing I appreciate in this is you have two single older men
Yeah.
who are who have lost their families in different ways, and they grow to care about each other. And it
Yeah.
is just friendship. Like Finbar and
Yes, yeah.
Joseph are both, mid 40s, older mice and otter. And there's a profound like respect and friendship that develops over the course of the book.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just this respect that grows between them. And Joseph is the one at the end when Finbar dies, laying Finbar's body out essentially and grieving so deeply the loss of a friend.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that Brian, there's obviously romance in Brian's books. And
Oh, yeah.
um I do love romance. I mean, let it be said again. I do love romance. I need it to there needs to be caveats around that.
Yes. Yeah.
But I just really love friendship and I love seeing friendships that are deep and caring and um intimate in a way that are it's just real empathy and real understanding and
Yeah.
compassion and love for someone else
Yeah.
that that that's just what it is we're just friends and we just love each other so much. And
Yeah.
I think Brian is actually really good at writing friendships
Yes,
across the
absolutely.
board. And so that's why it's a 4 for me because like there are other things we say this every time. There are other things that are coming. The Craiga saga, I
The
think, will
Krega
get
Saga.
5s across the board for me. Um,
Once we hit that first Krega book,
I know.
yeah.
So excited. Um, yeah, and I think there's so much to say about like the power of friendship, and even with Marielle and Dandon, they're traveling around together, they're besties,
Yeah.
and it's a whole yeah. So I think it's really good.
And I do think that's actually a really great example is Marilyn Dandon are literally a great setup for a romance,
Mhm.
but they only have friendship
Yep.
between the two of them.
Yep.
So it's not something that you have to really like yes, it'd be cool if there was a romance there, but it's not. That's not what it is kind
Yeah.
of a thing. But
Okay.
yeah, so like Marilyn Dandon, I think like I do agree with you and also don't at the same time about the friendship bit and stuff. I have kind of like thoughts on that I won't go
Mhm.
into with this. But I do completely agree. Like there's moments I'm like, yeah, I wish these characters were in love with each other, but that's just
Mhm.
me. But I'm also like I fully am aware of the nuance of that they're just friends. Like Mary and Dandon, they're just friends.
Yeah.
Dury and Roofbrush, they're just
Mhm.
friends. Joseph and Finbar, they're friends and everything. And that like there's even another great male female example in Loam Hedge that we will get to
Mhm.
see and talk. Actually, that'll probably be another really good one that we'll talk about
Yeah.
and stuff because it's also our normal dynamic creature duo of otter and squirrel
Yeah.
and stuff. So it definitely is he does a really good job with friendships. And I think that, and also I feel like I don't remember which book we talked about this a lot with, but the the hospitality aspect mixed with the friendship aspect is what makes this a classic series for me, of why despite my holdups with it, I love it still and everything. And I will always think of it fondly. I will recommend it to people, younger people, older people. And all that kind of stuff, even if I've grown past it in a lot of ways as a reader and everything. So
I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's the hospitality and community and friendship aspect of it that are just so touching. And it's so crazy to see how my reading has been formed by this, and how even my like understanding of certain things in the world has been formed by these books and reading in general. So we love reading. Read all the time. You few people who listen to this podcast, read more books. That should be, if we ever make merch, we should make merch that says read more books.
We should make stickers.
I agree, but it's actually kind of expensive to make stickers.
It is.
And also just for 2 people.
Right now, we can make a small amount of stickers.
Okay.
Thoughts.
I have friends who know how to make stickers. We could have them make us stickers.
Okay.
I've got friends. We got the hookups, Brianna.
Got the hookups.
Any other thoughts on the Bellmaker?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
Okay. If you have any more, you can tell me and we won't put it in the podcast, because once we're done recording, we are done recording.
Yeah, we are done recording.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of the Readers Clubhouse. If you liked this discussion and you want to hear more, you can find us on YouTube and Spotify every other Friday. You can check our episode description for our socials and join us in the Clubhouse next time as we go a little bit different, because next month is February and it is the month of love and it is romance month and everybody loves that, blah, blah, blah. But we are going to do something that Brianna and I are calling the Emmathon. Yeah. Now, I'm really proud of that name.
You should be. It's great, and it's such a distinct thing, and I cannot wait for us to talk about.
Next month, we will be discussing Jane Austen's Emma.
Yep. And
we will be reading the book first. We'll be discussing the book first. We're not necessarily going to read the book first. And then to mix things up, make it a little bit spicy, we are going to watch all 3 of the movies of Emma. We're not going to watch the BBC series of Emma. We are watching the Kate Beckinsale Emma, Gwyneth Paltrow Emma, and Anna Joy Taylor one. So, and then we will have a discussion about them as our second episode in February. So we're really excited about this. We've already watched one of the movies.
Yeah. And
let me tell you guys, I'm almost like, should we put a microphone on Kaytlyn while we're watching this? Because there's some thoughts. Thank you guys so much. We are excited to see you next time for Emma by Jane Austen.
Yeah.
Have a great time. See you guys later. Bye.